This heartless teenager sent away behind the iron bars for 4 life sentences and additional 71 years in prison, and he was only 17 years old. Hello everyone, my name is Clantus and welcome to the Iron Bars, my true crime YouTube channel. So without wasting your time, let's get into today's story, and it is the story of a young man by the name of Cameron Wilson. Unfortunately, I could not find any details about his date of birth. However, he does give me a Scorpio vibe. Sorry, Scorpios. Well, you know the deal. So Cameron Wilson was born and bred in Cape Flats township of Hines Park, just outside the city of Cape Town in the Western Cape, South Africa. So if you were wondering what are the Cape Flats, basically the Cape Flats is a 2 square meter residential area that was allocated to mixed race people of Cape Town, which here in South Africa we refer to them as colored people. This is not an offensive term here in South Africa, considering the fact that the American history with the word is pretty ugly, but here in South Africa it is acceptable. We call mixed race people coloreds, and it's not an offense. However, also there are people that look like colored people, but they're actually not. They are the original people of South Africa known as the Khoisan, and they do not identify as colored people. So I thought let me add that little information in this video. So the Cape Flats is a place that is riddled with all kinds of social ills, especially the township of Hines Park, where poverty, high levels of crime, teenage pregnancy, and alcoholism, as well as drug use and dropping out of school are prevalent. And the biggest pain in the neck for the people living in the Cape Flats is gangsterism. So it turned out that Cameron Wilson comes from a well-off family, a family that was loving, a family that was nurturing, a family that always provided for him. Anything that he wanted, he got it. It didn't matter how much it cost. And the family was quite well respected and influential in the community of Hines Park and the surroundings. So when I looked into Cameron Wilson's academic background, it turns out that the man hated school. He would not consider school as anything that he felt was important in his life. He made sure that every single day he did not attend school. Instead, he would roam around the streets of Hines Park, basically doing nothing, while all of his peers would be in class learning. So he disregarded school. He called school pathetic. He thought that there's something else that brought him pride, and then he was going to achieve that by hook or crook. I tried to find out what his parents felt about him not attending school, but seemingly the parents also did not care whether he did go to school or he did not go to school. They did not consider the fact that he was still a young man who needed education and needed to get up every morning and go to school. So he eventually dropped out of school and became a full-time loafer around Hines Park. So when Cameron Wilson dropped out of school, he never once attempted to earn any income. He did not go and find a job, learn some skills so that he can take care of himself as well as his future. However, he did depend a lot on his mom and dad, who seemingly were well off because of whatever businesses that they were up to. And so he didn't feel the need that he needed to go and work. All he needed to do is make demands to his father or his mother, and boom, it fell on his lap. So it's clear that Cameron Wilson was a spoiled brat. So let's get to why the family was well respected and influential in Hines Park and surroundings, and also in the gangsterism world. So it turned out that Cameron Wilson's father, whose name is Abraham Wilson, is an alleged prominent member of the 28s. I will explain the 28s, who they are, and how and what role do they play in the gangsterism world. So Cameron's father, Abraham Wilson, was once accused of multiple murders in the Western Cape. So the 37-year-old Abraham Wilson was accused of multiple murders. At this time in 2017, in June, he appeared before the court being accused of killing a popular gospel singer in the Cape Flats. So the community of Hines Park had given the police a tip-off that it was Abraham Wilson who did the drive-by where a gospel singer by the name of Wilton Fredericks was murdered. The community of Hines Park and the surroundings were already tired of Abraham Wilson and his gang because they were busy terrorizing the entire community of Hines Park and other parts of the Cape Flats. And so the community felt that it was time that they took matters into their hands but involved the police by giving them a tip-off about who had actually murdered Wilton Fredericks. And of course, Abraham Wilson was one of the people that was pointed out, and in 2017, while his son was on trial, he too was attending his own murder trial. So we now have established that the Wilson family, they are not just respected and influential in the community. As a matter of fact, they are feared by the people in the community. As you and I know that fear usually drags out the so-called respect. Sometimes people think that when people respect you is because you have earned the respect, when in fact you are terrorizing people, and as a result they fear you, and then you think you are being respected when in fact you are not being respected. And as for influence, of course, if you are a person like Abraham Wilson, who is a gang leader of the 28s, if you know anything about the 28s, you will do exactly what they tell you without argument or questions. So they were not respectfully in a way that they earned it, but in a way of driving fear amongst the people of their community. So I feel obliged to explain to you what are the 28 gang. I'm not quite sure how far spread is this phenomena of numbers gang in the world. I don't know in your country, if you are from the US, what you call it. If you are from the UK, what do you call it? If you're from Australia, what you call it. Here in South Africa, we call it the numbers gang. So there are 3 numbers gang here in South Africa, and that is the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th. And I will explain individually what each numbers gang represent and their responsibilities. So this numbers gang phenomena started in prisons since the prison concept in South Africa was introduced. So ever since then, of course, this is hundreds of years ago, and of course it's also well established because it is in places you never would think existed. I'm talking about the numbers gang. So let's start with the 26. The 26ers are what you would call hood rats. They are like the bottom of the barrel. These guys' job or responsibility is to accumulate wealth and power for the 27th and the 28th. So in other words, they're almost like messenger boys. They're the same boys who basically have to prove themselves in order to rise up in the ranks. So the 26ers will do absolutely anything and everything that the 27th and the 28th tell them to do so that they can be accepted into the so-called family, which is of course a gang. Now, because the 26ers, they want to prove a point, they are often the most brutal of people who lack remorse, humanity, anything that makes up a human being. They lacked it because they wanted to impress the people that are going to promote them up in the ranks. So in a nutshell, the 26ers are the beginners who still have to earn their place in the 27th as well as in the 28th. Even though they have to work up the rank, there are still ranks within the 26ers before you graduate to the next level. These guys are dangerous. And in most cases, they've got nothing to lose. You and I know that a person that has nothing to lose, especially a man who's got nothing to lose, is the most dangerous person that has ever walked the planet Earth. So who are the 27s? Now, the 27s are a very interesting bunch because number one, they are known but not well known. They live in secrecy. Everything of theirs is private. You can never really identify that this individual is a 27. Here in South Africa, how you would know that a person is a 27, usually when they greet you, they would use the 7 sign, basically 27. I think that if you do something like this, then somebody else will know that you are a 27. So an ordinary guy like me who is not part of the numbers gang and I use the 7, I may actually be a target of either a 26 or a 28, maybe because there's some kind of a disagreement that is going on. So as an ordinary person who's walking down the streets, I need to be careful as well how I utilize my hands when I greet other people. So it's quite interesting that even ordinary people might be considered as the 27s because they are unknown. Nobody actually knows them that, okay, they can pinpoint this is a 27. Why? Because they live in secrecy. And the reason why they live in secrecy is because they are the administrators between the 26s and the 28s. Meaning that the 26s are not allowed to go over the 27s and go directly to the 28s and speak to them, because the 28s are the big bosses. They are the CEOs and the owners of the numbers gang. They've earned their strides and there is no way they will be caught dead sitting with a 26. So everything goes through the 27s. So basically the 27's job or responsibility is to run things between the 26s and the 28s. So the people that are able to identify candidates for graduation or promotion are the 27s because they work closely with both these groups. In some cases, the 27s can be quite visible in some communities, particularly in our townships. I'm sure you know somebody in your community who lives an opulent life, but you have never seen them wake up a day in their life, going to the office, or had gone to school, or graduated for that matter, or have some kind of a business, yet in their yard they've got a slew of very expensive vehicles and they wear designer clothes. They also take expensive vacations. Some even own private jets. And you always ask yourself, where do you work? How do you make your money? Yes, before anybody comes for me, there are indeed people who are doing legitimate business. Most of these businesses are online, where they make lots of money through online businesses. However, way before the internet came, we knew, or at least we know of somebody in our community who lived a life that was quite questionable, particularly their wealth. So it turns out that some of these people that you may suspect that they are doing crime, those are your 27s. 27s are also trend setters, and they are also the recruiters for the 26s, because at the end of the day, in order for them to be able to recruit young boys, they've got to look the part. The young boy must desire to be like them, must aspire to own the things that they own, and also come closer to the 27s just to become friends with them. And that is when the 27 will start grooming this young boy. Oftentimes, these young boys come from broken families or families where there is no love, there is no kind of warmth and sense of family. And so the 27s, they provide all of that. They provide love, they provide family, they provide friendship, and they provide money. And so these young boys then end up being recruited without even noticing that they are now part of the numbers gang. However, before they can even prove themselves, usually they'll be given a task to do something awful to another human being. Sometimes they'll give them a target, and the target could be a policeman or a prison guard or warden or a nurse or a baby or a pregnant woman, so that they can prove themselves that they are worthy to be part and parcel of this lifestyle. And finally, the 28s. Like I mentioned earlier, that the 28s are the big boss. They are the big dog. They are the CEO of the numbers gang. They are to be respected. They are to be worshipped in some cases. And nobody dares to touch the 28s, including the police. The 28s also have a ranking, just like you would find in the police force or in the army, and these guys, they give out serious orders. So most of the agenda for the other two groups is devised by the 28s. So the 28s can decide that, okay, we need to start promoting people. Either the members are dying or the members are getting arrested or whatever the case might be. To fill up the battalion, more recruitments needs to be done, and graduations or promotions need to take place in order to keep things accordingly. So the 28th responsibility is to fight on behalf of the 26th and the 27th. So meaning that if a 26th is arrested and the 28th know the police commissioner to make the case go away, they can do that. And in many cases, that is exactly what happens, because the numbers gang, like I said earlier, it's almost in every level of life. That includes churches, police stations, even politicians. I know, crazy. The numbers gang is also found in female prisons, also known as the silver. And these women are brutes. So the more you rise in the rank of these numbers gang, the more influential and powerful you become, including wealthier you become. Sometimes you are considered as powerful as well as wealthy according to the accumulation of wealth you have made to this point, and then you'll be treated differently. You'll be treated differently by absolutely everybody that knows you. Hence, people will say, oh, that guy is well respected in the community, when in fact he is feared by the community because of the status he holds as a numbers gang. So back to the case, and now we understand where Abraham Wilson comes in, because as I was trying to search more about his murder cases, I couldn't find anything. I'm not even sure if the man is convicted or he was acquitted or the case just disappeared. Nothing. Absolutely nothing about what transpired in 2017 after his first appearance in June. So this must tell you something about the power and influence that he has. And I'm only saying this allegedly because I don't have the facts before me. So let's work with allegedly. So in October of 2014, a young man by the name of Alfonso van Rooyen is stabbed several times on the chest. Alfonso was coming from a friend's place when he was walking home, and he came across a young man by the name of Cameron Wilson. So I'm not quite sure what had transpired between Alfonso and Cameron Wilson that ended up with Alfonso being stabbed several times on the chest. Cameron Wilson fled the scene immediately after Alfonso fell to the ground. So it turned out a witness saw the entire thing take place and then ran and informed Alfonso's stepfather that his stepson is laying in a pool of blood on the corner because he had been stabbed by somebody that they all know in the community. However, the eyewitness was quite scared to mention the name of the perpetrator. So when Alfonso's stepfather got to Alfonso, who basically barely holding to life, so it's not clear whether the eyewitness called the ambulance and the ambulance delayed to come. As usual here in South Africa, you call an ambulance, it can take 5 hours to get to the person. So Alfonso's stepfather then decided that he would use his van and basically rush Alfonso to the hospital himself. However, on the way to the hospital, Alfonso succumbed to his wounds and he passed away on arrival. So just as the community was still grieving for Alfonso van Rooyen, 3 days later, a man by the name of Tayo Stober was shot dead. So a day before Mr. Stauber was shot dead, he had stood outside of Mr. Donovan Morris's house. This is Alfonso van Rooyen's stepfather, where they were talking about the death of Alfonso, when Mr. Stauber started pointing at the man that was passing by and said, "This is him that stabbed Alfonso." So Donovan Morris, together with Stauber, they started chasing after this man because they wanted to apprehend him and hand him over to the police. And this was Cameron Wilson. And of course, Cameron Wilson, realizing that he was being chased after, he ran away. So on the third day, Mr. Stauber and his wife, who have what we call here in South Africa a tuck shop. Basically, a tuck shop is a small shop that is attached to your house. So they were busy minding their own business and minding the customers that were buying their products when they saw a suspicious character just lurking around their shop. So Mr. Stauber then started to investigate. So somehow the suspicious character noticed that he has been spotted. That is when he started to run away. But Mr. Stauber would not let this one go. He got into his vehicle and started chasing after this suspicious character. So eventually Mr. Stauber catches up to this character. An altercation started taking place, and this is when this suspicious character pulled out a gun and started shooting at Mr. Stauber. Fortunately, he was unhit, but the suspicious man ran away. And this is when Mr. Stauber was like, "I'm not going to leave this guy because he might come back and harm me and my family. He needs to be arrested, and he needs to spend the night in jail and the rest of his life in prison." So he continued to chase after him. As he was continuing to chase after him, we're not quite sure what happened thereafter until an eyewitness came running to Mr. Stauber's wife to tell her that her husband has been shot 5 times in the chest, and he unfortunately passed away, and his vehicle had hit a concrete wall. Mr. Stauber's son, Amin, saw the entire altercation take place between him and this suspicious character. And Amin said he knew exactly who his father was fighting with, and that is Cameron Wilson. It is Cameron Wilson who murdered his father. He told his mom and the entire community. So the police were called and told who the suspect was. So the police went to Cameron Wilson's home, where they found his mother, who said there is no way that her son was outside during the shooting because he was busy playing his Xbox in the house. In court, Cameron Wilson's mother testified that the reason why Cameron had left the house to the crime scene, is because he heard a commotion about 1 kilometer away from the house, and so he ran to investigate to see what this was all about. 1 kilometer, you can hear a commotion? Right. So on the 25th of December 2014, Ernest Erasmus and his girlfriend Christeline van Rooyen had visited a local bar here in South Africa. We call them taverns. If you remember, Hines Park, it is Cameron Wilson's home and township. So after about an hour of drinking in this tavern, Ernest and his girlfriend Christeline decided that they should head back home to go celebrate Christmas with their respective families. So they picked up whatever it is they could pick up, and then they started walking to their respective homes. So as they were walking towards, before they separated ways, that is when Ernest realized that his marijuana that he had in the pocket had disappeared. So he was not quite sure if it fell off at the tavern or it fell off along the way. So Christeline then suggested that they trace back their step and see if they would not find it along the path that they had taken earlier. And indeed, they did exactly that, and they found the pack of marijuana. And that is when they turned back and started going to their respective homes. So this is when they came across Cameron Wilson. The couple did know Cameron personally, and they knew him as Wong. That's his nickname that he was called in Hines Park. This is when Wilson started demanding from Ernest to give him 20 Rand. That is about $1.10. And then Ernest said, I'm sorry, the one that I have with me is money that I'm going to buy something for myself. But of course, Cameron Wilson does not take a no for an answer. And guess what he does? He pulls out a knife and stabs Ernest on the neck. So as Ernest was beginning to bleed and they were in a nearby drug den called Angel's Yard, he then called out to his girlfriend to run into Angel's Yard and hide herself. She wasted no time. She ran straight into Angel's Yard to basically protect herself. Unfortunately, about an hour since she was hiding in Angel's Yard, that is when somebody came running to her to alert her that her boyfriend is lying dead on the field opposite Angel's Yard. So of course, Crystalline ran to the soccer field where her boyfriend laid dead. But when she got there, the entire crime scene was already cordoned off by the police. They were detective and forensic, basically collecting evidence. And when she identified herself, this is when the police asked her to take some of the items that he had on him. And one of those items was the 20 Rand note that Cameron Wilson had demanded from him. So at the end of the day, what was the point of stabbing him if he was not going to take that 20 Rand? That is $1.10. Let that sink in. So between December and March of 2015, and nothing is reported about Cameron Wilson's activities, whether he continued to terrorize the community of Hines Park or elsewhere in the Cape Flats. But in April of 2015, Cameron Wilson strikes again. And this time around, he comes across two young men in their 20s. One of them's name was Cody Philander. And Cameron Wilson was on his BMX bike when he started bullying these two 20-something-year-old men. Of course, the 20-something-year-old boys did not pay attention to him or entertain him as he was trying to demand from one of the guys who were carrying a backpack. He wants to know what was in the backpack, that they should hand it over to him. But of course, the two young men looked at him and thought, this guy's crazy. Doesn't he realize that we are two, he's one? Secondly, we are older than him. And thirdly, we are practically bigger than he is. He is at a disadvantage. And when Cameron Wilson realized that he could actually find himself in trouble with these boys, that is when he pulled out a knife and threatened them that next time he's going to stab them if they are not going to do as it tells them. Of course, he rode away his BMX bike and disappeared into the night. However, the following day, Cody Philander had gone to a nearby tuck shop to buy something, and this is when he came across Cameron Wilson. Cameron Wilson then approached Cody, and then he basically went straight to Cody and punched him in the face, and Cody wore eyeglasses. So the whole point of Cameron punching Cody in the face, particularly where he wears his glasses, was because he was hoping that the glasses would break and then they would prick his eyes and he would go blind. But fortunately, the eyeglasses fell to the ground, and as Cody was trying to pick them up, that is when Cameron Wilson took out a knife and stabbed him in the back, and he fled the scene. So still in April of 2015, a woman by the name of Donnie Davids was walking in the field, basically going to another part of the township, when she came across one of her male friends, and they started talking. This male friend happens to be Cameron Wilson's cousin. And then as they were just chatting, minding their own business, probably catching up about this and that, or maybe telling the friend that she is going wherever she's going to, that is when they came across Cameron Wilson, who then, without saying a word, told his cousin, "You start kicking this woman." Of course, the cousin, knowing what type of a person Cameron was, he did exactly as his cousin had demanded him to do. Of course, Donnie was quite surprised, and he asked Cameron, "Why are you doing this?" This is when Cameron, without saying a word, dragged Donnie into a nearby bush Then he started undressing her, and then he proceeded to force himself on her. And when he was done forcing himself on her, he began to kick her, and then he started taking basically stones and rocks and hitting her on the face. And Donnie kept asking, "Why are you doing this?" And immediately when Donnie found an opportunity to escape, she tried to run, but unfortunately Cameron caught up to her. He took out a knife and basically stabbed her in the neck, and then he fled the scene. Fortunately, Donnie Davids would survive the entire ordeal. I'm not quite sure if the cousin was still looking around, or he ran away, or why he did not go and call the police or somebody to come and help Donnie, but there's nothing or no reports about what he did thereafter when his cousin, Cameron Wilson, was busy attacking this woman. So it turned out that there were some people who heard Donnie's screams, and they tried to run towards the scenes. And when they ran towards the scenes, they saw Cameron Wilson running away from the scene, but they were not quite sure if he was just running, jogging, or coming from somewhere, or he was the perpetrator. Of course, Donnie did identify Cameron Wilson as the man that attacked her. Of course, Donnie Davids wasted no time. She went straight to the police and reported Cameron Wilson for what he had done to her. The police then did go to Cameron Wilson's house once again, whose mother was like, "My child, he was in the house. He's done nothing wrong." Of course, it's a typical thing that a family like theirs will do, maybe trying to intimidate the police or lie to the police, or maybe try to remind the police that, do you know who you're dealing here with? But anyways, so Cameron Wilson was taken in for questioning. He denied everything. However, DNA evidence was collected from both him as well as the woman's items, including her underwear as well as vaginal fluids that were collected. And guess what? They all were a perfect match to Cameron Wilson. And you would think this is the end of this horrific story, but no, there's more. So during his trial, Cameron Wilson denied that he ever forced himself onto Donnie Davids. As a matter of fact, he said to the court that it was consensual what happened between him and Donnie. He is very surprised that the police actually carried out the whole tampering of evidence, because at the end of the day, they needed a suspect. He further told the court that if Donnie did not like or consented to the entire thing, then she should have screamed, because people were not too far away where they had had sex. So on the 24th of April 2015, Abigail Blakey and Stacey Lee Mohale were walking from somewhere going to the township of Philippi when they came across Cameron Wilson together with his 15-year-old friend. And the two boys struck up a conversation with these two girls when suddenly, or out of the blue, Wilson pulled out a gun and led the two girls into an abandoned shack where he forcefully undressed Stacey Lee and began to force himself on her. After he was done forcing himself on Stacey Lee, that is when he went outside and came back with two tires, and then he threw the tires over the two girls. Basically, the two girls, he made them sit back to back, and then he threw the tire over their neck and then set them alight. So while the two girls were burning, this is when Cameron Wilson looked at his 15-year-old friend, gave him a knife and said, "Stab them to death." So I'm not quite sure what this 15-year-old boy did, because there's absolutely no reports about what he did, and there's no testimony from him as to what he did. However, there was a man that was working his field when he saw a thick black smoke, and then he realized that if he does not attend to this fire, it might become a forest fire, which is something quite prevalent in the Western Cape, and he would not want something like that to happen. So he decided to go and investigate and possibly put this fire out. That is when, as he was walking towards the fire, he saw Cameron Wilson, whom he knows very well, running away from the fire. And as he was getting closer and closer to the fire, he then realized that there were two girls that were wrapped around a burning tire. And that is when he realized that, oh my goodness, he is witnessing a murder scene. This is when he started thinking how to put out the fire, and that's when he started using sand to throw over the fire to put it out, and it successfully was put out. And he immediately called the police, who came running to the scene. Unfortunately, when they arrived to the scene, Stacey Lee had succumbed to the burns as well as smoke inhalation. Fortunately, Abigail Blakey survived but had severe injuries to her face as well as her body. Abigail Blakey would take to the stand in court and testify that Stacey Lee had begged Cameron for mercy. But Cameron looked like a devil himself. He would not even respond to the cries of Stacey Lee. He just continued doing what he was doing, adamant on killing them. So, of course, the police were told that it was Cameron Wilson who had done this deed. And again, the police found themselves at the door of the Wilson family, basically to come and arrest Cameron Wilson this time. And he was successfully arrested, but the following day, he got bail and he walked out a free man. And you would think he learned a lesson, and probably he's never going to do anything to jeopardize his freedom again. But no, he continued on his rampage. So when Cameron Wilson came out on bail, he started accusing the police of basically abusing him and basically doing things that they shouldn't have done to him, one of which was to force him to sign a confession that would implicate him in the murder of Stacey Lee Mohale. He said he tried everything of his best to defend himself against the police, but unfortunately for him, none of all these claims were substantiated or proven because he did not seem to have a scratch on his body to suggest that he had been abused or hit, kicked, as he had claimed he was. So now we move to 2016. This is September of 2016. This is about a year since Wilson had gotten bail for the murder of Stacey Mohale. So on the 11th of September 2016, a young lady by the name of Nicole McEwen and her friend were going to a nearby drug den, basically to buy some substance. When they got to this house, Nicole decided to stand outside while her male friend went inside to purchase the substance. And this is when they were approached by Cameron Wilson, who had a friend with him. This is when Cameron asked Nicole if she could please give him a lighter or a matches. This is when Nicole said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have neither." Wrong answer for Nicole, because after that, Cameron Wilson pulled out a knife and basically started stabbing Nicole in the back. And then Cameron Wilson and his friend fled the scene. So this incident with Nicole McEwen happened at 1 a.m. in the morning of the 11th of September. And on the same morning, around 5 a.m., another woman by the name of Rosalind Lackey was standing outside of her kitchen door when she heard a commotion just across her house. A house had a field. There was a soccer field or some kind of a field across her house. She heard a commotion, a woman screaming. So she decided to run and investigate and possibly help this woman who was getting attacked. This is when she came across two men basically busy beating up this woman. When she tried to ask these men to please stop beating her, they turned on her and started hitting her and beating her with sticks and stones and bricks all over her head. She fell to the ground screaming herself, and another woman heard Rosalind screaming, came running to come to the rescue of Rosalind, and this is when these two men fled the scene. Rosalind was quickly rushed to the hospital so that they could start treating her serious injuries all over her head, face, and legs. So eventually the community then realized why exactly Rosalind Lackey was being attacked. That's because she had come to the rescue of a woman who was found naked and dead in the field. It was the 18-year-old Lakita Moore. She was the person that Rosalind was trying to defend. Lakita Moore did not stay too far away from the Hines Park area. Basically, she lived in an informal settlement of Hines Park. So Lakita Moore was coming back from a karaoke party at a soccer club not too far from Hines Park when she was attacked. The police were alerted and forensic pathology gave a report about the injuries of Lakita Moore. And this is what they had reported. That Lakita Moore was stabbed 98 times. Both of her legs were broken, as well as stab wounds behind her head, which indicated that at some point she tried to run away, but her perpetrators managed to catch up to her and stabbed her in the back. Once again, Cameron Wilson was identified as one of the attackers of Lakita Moore. Why? Because they believe that Lakita Moore and Cameron Wilson used to be lovers. So basically this relationship blossomed after Wilson had gotten bail for the murder of Mohale. However, Cameron Wilson denied that he and Lakita were ever involved because he knew Lakita to be his cousin's girlfriend, not his. Cameron also told the police when he was being questioned that he was not even present during the time of Lakita's murder because he was in bed at his grandmother's house. He further told the police that the previous day there was a family braai. When he got bored at the family braai, he decided to go to the soccer club to attend the karaoke party. And there he did indeed see Lakita, but he did not speak to her at all. However, he said that he did notice when she left with two men. He then told the police that the following day, that is when he heard or somebody came and told him that the naked body of Lakita Moore was found in the soccer field and that there were people looking for him. So of course the police then pressed on with some questions that seemed to pin Cameron Wilson against the wall. This is when he changed his story again and said, wait a minute, by the way, Lakita, myself and another boy decided to leave the karaoke party and basically walk her home. So as we were walking her home, this other boy out of the blue started attacking Lakita. So when he says, he tried to ask, hey man, what are you doing? He said, mind your own business. This is my girlfriend. We are having a small altercation. He then said to the police, that is when he decided not to say anything, just fold his arm and watch the whole thing take place. He said he did see in shock when this young man pulled out a knife and beginning to profusely stab Lakita on the chest and stomach and all over her body. He says that after killing her, he then started cutting off her clothes and then he started mutilating her corpse. The third version of this story, he said, oh, he and a mentally ill boy by the name of Xavier Bester were actually walking Lakita home when this boy started having a mental breakdown of some sort and started attacking Lakita. He first punched her in the face. She had a nosebleed. As a matter of fact, the witnesses say in the karaoke party, it was Cameron Wilson who had punched Lakita in the face and gave her a nosebleed. This is when she decided to leave, and that's when Cameron Wilson, together with a second boy, followed her. And as a result, this is where we are at. So in court, Lakita's sister did take to the stand and confirmed that Lakita as well as Cameron Wilson were indeed lovers. And she said that Cameron used to abuse Lakita. Basically, Lakita was planning on dumping him because she had had enough of him. As a matter of fact, Cameron was very possessive of Lakita. He in fact ordered Lakita not to go to the karaoke party because that's how controlling he was to her. However, she did go to the karaoke party, and this is when Cameron punched her in the face. I'm assuming he asked her, what are you doing here when I told you not to come? And so that was the altercation that Cameron himself denied ever happened. So the police asked Cameron Wilson, what did you do when your friend was busy attacking Lakita? He told the police that he tried to wrestle him. This guy's name was Xavier Bester, in case I have not said it. And now, after trying to wrestle him, they shook hands and then they went their separate ways, with Lakita naked and dead and mutilated. Okay. Interestingly, about 16 hours after the death of Lakita, and on the same spot and field, guess whose body was found shot dead? Yes, the mentally ill Xavier Bester. Now the question is, who murdered Xavier? Because there's absolutely no report and nobody knows to this very day who killed Xavier Bester. But you and I can put our IQs together and kind of like suspect towards the Cameron side, because at the end of the day, it's clear that Xavier was the one that witnessed all of this taking place, where Lakita was getting attacked, murdered, and mutilated. And so the eyewitness had to go. And that is why he was found on the same spot that Lakita's body was laying. When Cameron Wilson was asked who attacked Rosalind Lackey, he said it was Xavier Bester. Of course, Xavier Bester was no longer there to defend himself because he was murdered. However, in court, Rosalind Lackey was adamant that it was Cameron Wilson that had attacked her. So Cameron Wilson was blasé about everything. He was like, you know what, I don't know what she's talking about. Probably she was high on the night, and so she saw my face. So Cameron Wilson's grandmother was called to the stand to testify whether Cameron was indeed in his bed during the murder of Lakita Moore and the attack of Rosalind Lackey. The grandmother did not lie to the stand. She said, well, the night before, Cameron did not return home. He only came back the next morning. So, of course, all his denials and everything that he was trying to say to the court that it was not him, it's all a lie. Basically, the grandmother was the final nail on his coffin of freedom. The other evidence that really refuted every denial that Cameron put on the table was the fact that on the 11th of September, the police had collected some of the clothing items he was wearing, and they went and tested them for DNA. And guess what? They found 2 sets of DNA on his jacket. One was of Rosalind's blood. The second one was of Lakita Moore's blood, showing that indeed he was the perpetrator. Ironically, after the murder of Lakita Moore, he then handed himself over to the police. Basically, he did not hand himself over to the police. He just went to the police station to say, hey, I heard there was a murder of Lakita Moore. Of course, the police was like, okay, so what are we supposed to do for you? So it was quite clear that he was either fishing or he was going to see if he would get arrested if anybody identified him as the perpetrator. No one knows why he went to the police. However, his defense attorneys said that he went there because he was not interested in running away from the law and its full might. As a matter of fact, what the defense lawyer was trying to do was to show his positive traits as part of mitigation if ever he is convicted of any of the accusations that will be laid on him. Well, indeed, Cameron Wilson was arrested for the murder of Lakita Moore because he was the one that was identified as the murderer, plus the DNA evidence that pointed out that he was indeed the murderer of Lakita Moore. And of course, when he went to court, he did try to get bail and he was denied bail because he was already having 6 charges pending against him. And these charges included murder and attempted murder. So after 51 days of testimony by over 40 witnesses, the trial of Cameron Wilson came to an end. In June of 2017, Cameron Wilson is finally convicted on 13 charges. And they are, let me read them out for you. 5 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, 3 counts of forcing himself, possession of illegal firearm and ammunition, assault, and conspiracy to commit a crime. Those are the 13 charges that he was found guilty of. However, Cameron Wilson would be acquitted of 2 charges. They included the forcing himself on Stacey Lee before murdering her, as well as the attempted murder of Cody Philander due to lack of evidence. So despite all the fear, despite all the knowledge they know about Cameron Wilson's father, these over 40 witnesses pushed through and testified against Cameron Wilson. Some of them were threatened with death if they took to the stand. That also included his girlfriend who had disappeared. No, the girlfriend, nothing happened to her. She and her family decided to distance themselves from the Wilsons so they could protect their own reputation. So during mitigation of sentence, Lakita's father took to the stand and begged the court never to let Wilson out because he was a danger to society. He has taken a lot from him, including his wife who had a total mental breakdown and even gotten herself addicted to very strong drugs, trying to numb the pain she was feeling at the loss of her daughter. Lakita's father begged the court they bring back the death penalty and hang Cameron Wilson. When the judge read out Wilson's conviction and sentences, the crowd that was sitting in the gallery burst out in celebration. Some of them were crying tears of joy, happy that Wilson got what he deserved. Of course, Wilson had pled not guilty to all the charges that were laid against him, but the court did not believe the version of his stories, his denials, and all the changing of his statements and versions, and found him guilty as charged. The way Cameron Wilson did not care. During his sentencing, he would laugh, he would roll his eyes, he would stretch, he would yawn, he would look at the crowd and smile, and he even clapped hands when the judge gave him 4 life imprisonment and additional 71 years in prison. He clapped hands and smiled at the judge. What's up with that? So as I've mentioned, Cameron Wilson received 4 life sentences and an additional 71 years imprisonment, which will run concurrently. So Cameron Wilson received 4 life terms for the murders of Toya Stable, Stacey Lee Mohale, Lakita Moore, and forcing himself on Donnie Davids. He was handed 15 years for the murder of Alfonso Van Rooyen, 5 years for possession of unlicensed firearm and ammunition, 15 years for the murder of Ernest Erasmus, 10 years for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit a crime, 6 years for assault with intent to commit grievous bodily harm, and 10 years for the attempted murder of Rosalind Lakay. And this is the part we're all supposed to be like, yay, it's ended, that's it. Now let him go rot behind the iron bars. But no. The court takes away that joy from anybody that has been listening to this case from the beginning to this point, because the court then decides to say that he would be eligible for parole in 25 years. This is when Cameron Wilson will be in his early 40s when he becomes eligible for parole, meaning that the court was not listening to the psychiatrists and psychologists that had come and given the expert reports to the judge and told the judge and diagnosed Cameron Wilson as a psychopath who has little chance of rehabilitation. Now, why give him parole? As far as I have read and understood psychopathy, is that people that are diagnosed with psychopathy, they ought to be arrested, whether they've committed a heinous crime or not. They ought to be arrested and locked away. That's the only cure for psychopaths, because if you let them roam the streets, it's only a matter of time before they start murdering people and becoming serial killers, like Cameron Wilson was also diagnosed as a serial killer. So after the sentencing was read to Cameron Wilson, he was then given the last word, and guess what he tells the nation? He said, "But at least I'm still alive." That was his last words to the people that he has caused so much harm, damage, pain, and suffering, that he is still alive. Wow. Well, that is it, guys, with a heartless teen serial killer who basically loved his way through his sentencing. Cameron Wilson. I thank you for watching, but before you leave, please do give this video a like, do subscribe to my channel if you have not yet, and don't forget to turn on the bell notification so that you get notified every time I upload a new true crime video. So please do leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think of this case, particularly the police and their absence in the earlier days of the case. And also, please do share this video far and wide so that more true crime lovers like yourself can discover my channel, and let's grow this thing. And also, it's good for the algorithm. Lastly, a super thanks will be highly appreciated. Now, just before I close this video, there's another thing that I also think I should also let you know about. There will be some changes that you are going to see on my body. Currently, I think right now you can see a small little difference. I was big, now I'm kind of like getting small. The reason why I'm getting small is because I am on a diet. I decided to go on a very strict vegan diet since the 1st of October up until now. And yes, of course, I do see the difference. I'm looking at myself right now and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm getting smaller. The biggest thing that you are going to see is my face basically shrinking. And of course, my shoulders as well is something else that you are going to see basically coming, like reducing. And this part of my body as well, as you can see, is no longer, usually I'm here. Usually this is where I am. Now this is where I am. So don't get shocked when you like, is he losing weight? Is he okay? I'm fine. I'm intentionally losing weight, and I'm also exercising. I just started jogging recently. And yes, the diet is working. And it's something that I'm also thinking about whether I should make this a lifestyle or what going forward. Because the question I'm asking myself is, where to from there once you lose the weight? Because I need to get to 100 kilograms. I'm not quite sure in LBS or pounds what that is. We use kilograms here in South Africa. So I need to get to 100 from 135. From 135 kilograms to 100 by December. By the 1st of December, I should have lost 35 kilograms, basically. So I'm happy. I'm all good. Thank you. I was just letting you know what's happening. Don't get shocked. I'm not ill. There's nothing happening of concern. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, you guys. I love you all so very much, and thank you for always supporting this channel. Mwah.